Hey, sixth graders. For this ed puzzle, we're just going to go through and we're going to take a look at parts of the animal and plant cell in terms of recognizing them in order to label those parts of the organelles. This is part of this unit. It's not the most important part. The most important part would be knowing what that function of that organelle is, not necessarily being able to identify it in a diagram. But I will tell you the reason I'm doing this video is because there will be some questions on the quiz this Friday, which is in replacement of your test, where there are some diagrams of cells and it's pointing to something and you need to be able to label it. So I'm going to use this website called Shepherd Software here, and it's going to go through, and I'm going to just kind of go through with you some of the hints and clues that I use to be able to identify parts of a cell in any diagram, because even though they're similar, there's lots of differences. Like if you just Google diagram of a cell or whatever and you go to the images, you'll see that there are some things that are common in all the drawings and all the diagrams, and then there are some variations, and so that can get a little bit tricky. So that's why I wanted to go through this with you guys here today. Okay, so answer the questions with the end puzzle as we go along. There's obviously not a lot of questions here as we go through. This is more just going through and trying to teach you guys some of these clues with parts of the cell. So I'm going to go right to the quiz here. Okay, if you answer all the questions correctly, you get to see a cell divide. Ooh, okay. So right now, this is giving us a description up here of the parts of the cell, and I'm not really even going to focus so much on that part as it's more of what these things look like, okay? So take a look here. Here's the plasma membrane. They're calling it the plasma membrane. We would just call it the cell membrane. We know it's a plasma membrane that's semi-permeable. It's letting things in and out of the cell. This thin lining controls what molecules enter and leave the cell. So we know that that's the plasma membrane, right? Easy. Okay, next question. So that's one clue, okay? For an animal cell, the outermost thing is always the cell membrane. In a plant cell, it's not the outermost thing, and so we'll get to that when we get to a plant cell. Holds genetic material, dictates which proteins the cell produces, okay? Well, if it's holding the genetic material, then we know that it must be the nucleus. The nucleus is usually easy to pick out. It's one of the bigger organelles, and it's usually somewhere towards the center of the cell. Okay? Most diagrams do this where they cut out a piece so that you can see inside of it, even though this one isn't asking you, and I don't think I will ask you on the test either, but there's the nucleolus inside there. Okay? Create proteins, and they're small. Well, anytime you see dots, okay, especially along this membrane that's around the nucleus, which we'll get to here in a second. Well, it's telling you it's the endoplasmic reticulum. Anytime we see dots on the endoplasmic reticulum, or even just dots floating around, okay, those are the ribosomes. Is it not telling me that's correct? There we go. All right, so those are ribosomes. And that's the clue for ribosomes are when you see some dots. Okay, DNA, this organelle contains DNA tightly packed into chromosomes. Well, we're going back to the nucleus again. If we're talking anything about DNA, we're going back to the nucleus. We've already talked about that. Not sure why they asked that again. Organelle to make ATP. ATP is energy. So that's the mitochondria. And let's talk about how we can tell what mitochondria is in a cell diagram. So they are usually these things that kind of look football shaped, almost kind of like a lima beam, if you will. I'm not really quite sure how else to describe that shape. And then they usually have some sort of squiggly lines in there. Okay, I think sometimes they even look like a foot. Okay, almost like a foot or a slider sandal even sometimes. Okay, but this one in this website, you can see the lines around there, and again, it's like this lima beam football kind of elongated circle, and that's the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, packaging plant puts lipids, proteins, all these things together. Okay, so that's the Golgi body or the Golgi apparatus. Now, they haven't asked a question yet still about the endoplasmic reticulum, but here's one that kids always get confused with. Both the Golgi body and the ER look very similar. There are these membranes that kind of wrap back and forth, kind of like Laffy Taffy, right? Kind of going back and forth. Here's the big hint to be able to tell those two apart. Golgi apparatus is usually away from the nucleus towards the exterior wall of the cell or the cell membrane. It's towards the outer part of the cell is usually where we see the Golgi body or the Golgi apparatus. The ER looks like the Golgi body, but it is always right around the nucleus. And that's because of its job. It's a transportation organelle, the ER, and it's mostly transporting ribosomes, and ribosomes are coming from inside of the nucleus there in the nucleolus. So that's where, and so it would make sense that the ER would be right next to the nucleus. Golgi body, its job is to package things together, and some things are meant to then stay in the cell, other things are meant to go outside of the cell. So it also makes sense that it's towards the outer part of the cell for those things that need to be distributed and leave outside of the cell. Okay, dotted with network of folds, dotted with proteins. There we go. Finally got to the ER. And like I said, it looks like the Golgi body, but it's always right by the nucleus. That's how you know it's the ER, the folded membrane right by the nucleus. Okay, last one is sometimes tricky. Oh, actually, I don't know if this was 7 out of 8. Okay, I don't know if this is the last one, but cytoplasm. When you're labeling a cell, if it's pointing to what appears to be nothing, if it looks like it's pointing to nothing, then it's talking about the fluid, that gel-like stuff that's in between and filling in all the gaps in the spaces. That's the cytoplasm. So if it looks like it's pointing to nothing, it's the cytoplasm. Okay. Break down cells waste. So like the recycling center, lysosomes. Okay, lysosomes usually just kind of look like jelly beans. I don't want to say jelly beans because that's kind of, I guess, what mitochondria look like. So they just kind of look like circles. Okay, they're just small circles. Vacuoles, okay, would also kind of, these purple things here are the vacuoles. Those things also are just small little circle things in animal cells. All right. Okay. Oh, we got another one. Ships proteins to the Golgi. Well, if it's shipping things, it's transportation. That's the ER. Fantastic. Ooh, yay! We got to see the cell divide. Cool. Okay. Let's go to plant cell real quick. Almost everything is the same. There's only just a couple differences. So we'll go through and we'll do it real quick. Okay. So this one we have to label. So let's go through a little bit at a time here. Let's start here. All right. This thing, it's folded back and forth. So we know it's a folded membrane, just like this is folded back and forth. So now the question is this around the nucleus? Well, this thing's pretty big and it's circular. It looks like the nucleus, but it's not. Okay. This here is actually in the plant cell, one of the differences between a plant and animal cell. It has one really big central vacuole. And there it is. There's your vacuole. So if this isn't the nucleus, then this folded membrane must be Golgi body and not the ER, because the ER needs to be around the nucleus. So let's go get the nucleus. There's the nucleus. Around it here is going to be the endoplasmic reticulum, the ER. Little dots. Hopefully you remember, little dots, ribosomes. There they are. Most of them here on the ER, but there's a couple of them floating around in the cytoplasm. Oh, cytoplasm. Let's go through that. Remember what I just said. Cytoplasm is usually pointing to nothing. So this doesn't look like it's pointing to anything. Neither does this, but it kind of is. It's pointing to these boundaries. And so that can't be the cytoplasm. This is pointing to this little guy here. Can't be that. This looks like it's not pointing to anything. Must be the cytoplasm. Good job. Okay, so that's the cytoplasm. All right, so let's go to these boundaries then. Well, if it's a plant cell, besides having one big vacuole as the difference between a plant and animal cell, we know that plant cells also have cell walls. So you need to know that the cell wall is the outermost boundary in a plant cell. For an animal cell, it's the cell membrane, or in this website, they call it the plasma membrane. And so on a plant cell here, it's right along the inside of the cell wall. All right, so that leaves just a couple left. Let's start with mitochondria. So mitochondria, we said, kind of looked like elongated circles or like a bean or something like that, or like a football. Well, these things kind of look like it, and so do these. These things have these little squiggles in it. Those squiggles are reminding me that it must be the powerhouse, the mitochondria. When it has these little dots in here and it's green, those little dots are chlorophyll that are inside the chloroplasts. There we go. And then we don't need to know anything about peroxisomes. Sorry. One wrong, just because I put it up to the chloroplast and it didn't take it. That's kind of garbage. Okay. I think that kind of goes through. If I went fast and you want to rewatch this, you can rewatch it. Tomorrow, the assignment is to go through and do a practice quizzes where I have some other black and white diagrams, or actually not all of them are black and white, but there's other diagrams on there where you're going to go through and you have to go through and label it. It's not for a grade, but I think it's good practice to get you ready for your quizzes test on Friday. All right. We'll talk to you later.